Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I am here this morning with Yehuda Ashkenazi, who is our resident sound healer, sound healing expert, and Kabbalah teacher extraordinaire. And you may recognize the name from his wife, who will be on next week. Miriam Ashkenazi will be with us for also some special episodes. But today we are talking about healing, remote and spontaneous healing, healing others through mystical means. And this week, specifically on the Kabbalistic calendar, is one in which the universe is bombarding, the broadcast from the universe is bombarding us with the support to heal ourselves. All we really need to do is be open to that, and that's why we are focusing this week on understanding healing from a spiritual perspective, from a metaphysical perspective. There's a lot out there today with the progress that science and medicine has made around nutritional support and even alternative medicine. And we're going to take it a step deeper today to talk about what happens on the unseen level when something or someone requires additional support in the form of healing, and how we can be channels for ourselves and others. Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual weather forecast where we glean through the wisdom of Kabbalah to provide our listeners with the most powerful and practical tools to navigate the coming 7 days. Inevitably, we share lessons and wisdom and tools that can help you any day of the year, anytime, anywhere. And obviously this week is no different, right? Healing is accessible at all times, but as we learn, the Kabbalistic calendar is not for measuring time, it's for measuring energy. And the Kabbalistic calendar tells us to pay attention this week, so that's what this week is. This week's episode is all about. Yehuda, maybe, or actually before I turn the mic over to you, you get to think a little bit more about the first thing you want to say. I want to make sure that everybody understands, and I know that some of you are probably listening for the first time, that everything, Kabbalah teaches that everything that exists in the physical reality, from the tiniest ant to the tallest sequoia tree and everything in between, has a spiritual cause, has a spiritual version of itself. And therefore, any situation, and you can literally, there isn't a situation you could say, well, what about this or what about this? And Kabbalah would say, okay, you're right. There's no spiritual cause for that. Literally, from the sun, the orbit of the planets around the sun to the tiniest grain of sand shifting 2 millimeters, everything has a spiritual cause. And therefore, when we look at the challenges that we face in our lives, we understand also that those two have spiritual causes. Anything from stuffy nose, which I've been suffering from for a little while, longer than I would have liked, to larger scale physical challenges, to arguments between toddlers on the playground, to arguments between countries. Everything, without exception, has a spiritual root. And when we talk about healing, right, I mean, it happened, trying to think of a good example. My daughter has growing pains. One of my kids has growing pains. And if you've had growing pains, you know that's pretty much the worst, because there really isn't too much you can do about it. And you don't know when it's going to end. And it usually strikes at night, which means it interferes with sleeping. And so we were talking about what could be, why she has it, and let's say her older brother didn't, right? Because there's a little bit of sometimes when challenges come up, we tend to say, why me? Right? Why is this happening to me? Why it didn't happen to everybody? What did I do to deserve this? These are questions that we all ask. It doesn't even have to be physical pain. It can be traffic, or the thing we wanted to buy is no longer in stock, or a person rejects us, or a job opportunity is rejected. Anything. A human tendency is very often to say, why me? And so we talked about, okay, there is certain things. She can put heat and ice on her knees, and she can do different things in the physical reality. But for some reason, she is being given an opportunity to turn inward and ask questions that she wouldn't ask if she didn't have this challenge. And I'm not saying we came to a conclusive understanding of why it happened to her and not anybody else. But the reason I'm sharing this story, and she's 10, so you don't have to be a monk or the Dalai Lama to ask these kind of questions. The spiritual level or evolution is irrelevant. The point is that when things happen to us, the first thing we do is ask, what's the message? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And that doesn't mean we don't go to a doctor. We did go to a doctor, to be fair. We did go to a doctor to make sure that it wasn't anything more than growing pains. And, if she needs the Advil or whatever, she doesn't like to take it, but once in a while she's so in pain, she's willing to take, or the homeopathy or whatever it is we have. But anything that comes to us on a physical level is there to awaken a spiritual journey. And on that note, Yehuda Ashkenazi.
Thank you for having me here, Elisheva. First of all,
it's a long time coming, that's for sure.
Yeah, I came, I think, 1 or twice, 2 years ago.
Right, in the ancient version of Weekly Energy Boost.
And the ancient version of myself.
Yeah, I think we've changed a lot in the last few years.
I hope so.
Hopefully our listeners notice that as well.
Yeah. So, where should we start? I think that, first of all, as far as the key perception and consciousness, as you mentioned, and I believe you speak about it often, as we're looking inward, one of the many conversations that I have with many people that they are on a spiritual path and direction, it is about the direction of the relationship between us and the Creator, us and the divine energy of this universe, right? Because one of the foundations of the wisdom that we use says that everything that we'll ever need, anything we'll ever need, all the healing, all the answers, all the clarity we will ever need, exist within us. And the question is, what is the pathway to access those levels of clarity, those levels of answers, those levels of healing that as we going through life and we might face different challenges, as the growing pain that you mentioned, the first thing we want to train our mind to do, it is as fast as we can to go inward. One of the things that my teacher, Goldberg, often would say, it is that the question that the person awakens is more important than the answer. And one of the issues that we might have, it is not either asking enough questions or asking questions in directions that will not lead us into clarities. The moment that the 10 years old beginning to be trained in the mind level to look inside and to ask not from a place of I'm a victim here.
Or blaming myself. You can also ask that question and go to blame.
This is a big thing. And starting to kind of navigate the direction of the communication internally into, wow, there is a lesson in that phase that I'm going through. There is an opportunity there. There is a unique work internally that, call it the universe, call it my soul, call it the creator, call it whatever name, right, is pushing me to reveal a new level of energy in any type of form. As we mentioned, it can be the clarity, it can be the healing. But the moment that we begin to focus the intention of the questions in the direction that goes inward, this is, I believe, where everything begins. All the revelations, all the healings, all the answers, the connection, the deeper level with sense of purpose. So this week is a big week, calling it the week of Pinchas, the week of healing. And as you mentioned, there is a big opening in the universe that can help each one of us to not only to be open for healing, but maybe to deepen the direction that we look into that energy called healing.
For sure. And I think a lot of people have questions around, why is this happening to me? Sometimes when people deal with chronic issues, especially, they ask, how can is this something that I need to be burdened with all my life, or can I change it? And when you look at those situations through a spiritual lens, you realize, and this is something that I see not only with regard to physical wellness or illness, but a person even let's say they decide to take a job somewhere, to move where they live. The reason they got the job was so that they could move there, or they needed to get the job to move to that city because there's something else there that they need to discover.
Right.
So I think that one of the things that's important to acknowledge, and we received questions from listeners on Instagram this week, and a lot of them were focused on this. How can I know why it's happening to me? A person has such and such issue. And again, you could use it to anything. A person is having struggles in their marriage, or it has lack of clarity about purpose. Why is it happening? Most of the time, the journey is such that why it's happening isn't in the next step. It may even be 10 steps later, that if you didn't look inward and start to ask those questions, you wouldn't find your soulmate. So it started with a healing challenge, but it led you to a discovery that led you to transformation and growth. It led you to the finding of the right job or the right person or what other reward we'll call it. So that paying attention and being curious about where is the message? What's the message? What do I need to be looking for? How can I open myself up to a different perspective is really where that journey begins. And it doesn't necessarily end with the answer, not only because you don't always get the answer, but because the actual challenge itself sets off a Rube Goldberg effect. You know, those things where the ball drops and then something falls and it blows up a balloon and the balloon pops and something, you know, it's like
Right.
It's called a Rube Goldberg. I don't know how else to explain it. But it's like, that's life. Life is a Rube Goldberg of different, sometimes it's an explosion, sometimes it's a flood. But the whole idea is it's trying to take us on a journey.
I think that in this journey, right, there are different kind of steps of consciousness that we can awaken. So when we, in a moment of not being able to see the reasons behind things, when you pay attention to the way that the mind works, probably for all of us by default, we try to figure things out. I try to remind all my students that the desire to know the why behind thing is very important, but the moment you catch yourself operating from, I call it from the brain state, from the brain level, to try to figure things out, to become maybe smarter, wiser about the process. And I hear many people coming with levels of clarity of connection between cause and effect in their lives that they might be missing the whole point. The moment that we try to connect in a logical sense different things that are happening, as you mentioned before, it can be 10 steps down the road that we will realize maybe the reason behind the things. But one of the works that I encourage many of our students to do, it is first of all to try to pay attention from what space inside of you do you try to receive the answer to whatever question you might have, healing or anything else, right? The moment that we pay attention to that place, that intellectual space, even that falls under the category of spirituality because we know there is cause and effect behind things, and then suddenly something happens and the mind right away goes into conclusion. The ability to detach our mind from those conclusions. And there is a difference between my mind figure things out, or I'm creating a space or internal condition for clarity to be shown to me from a different dimension of myself.
So how might that look or feel?
So I believe that many of us had the experience of driving our car, or I don't drive, but I'm next to the driver's seat, so taking a shower, walking on the beach, a moment that you do something that completely not related to the certain question that you had, and you experience a moment of clarity that comes from a place that you don't even know what it is. We call it kind of a suddenly, there was kind of a clarity. Suddenly there was an epiphany. Suddenly you realize something that you had a question about maybe for a few weeks or few years sometimes, right? But how does it feel? It feels that that clarity is not coming from yourself. It's not coming from your brain. It's a moment that most of people cannot even explain what it is and where is it coming from. But that feeling, when this awakening or this clarity is coming in, one thing I believe it is clear that it didn't come because I was thinking about it. It came from another space. And many times we need kind of to find a way to clear or to move ourselves from a situation that we're going through to allow that clarity to be shown to us. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think for many of us, we know that is true, but the rational mind is so much more familiar and autopilot for us.
Absolutely. This is why in the Sacred Sound meditation that I facilitate, that I guide, the first thing that we work on each session, 15 minutes, which for many people it is a lot, by the way, 15 minutes. The whole session is 1 hour.
Wow.
But even 15 minutes to sit down and through certain practice, working on slowing down your brain waves. Now, our brain is super active. Now, when the brain is super active, they call it the monkey mind. There are many different terms, right? But when the brain is super active, there is no room for any clarity to come in.
It's like the chatter is constant, so there's no pause, there's no space made for channeling, basically.
Right. Now, many people coming to the practice, to the sound session that I do. And one of the things that I hear from a lot of people, it is that they are not good in meditations, that they don't know and are not able to quiet the noise in their mind, that they fall asleep in meditations, right? I don't know how many of you, of the listeners, can relate to that. And one of the things that I try to emphasize, at least from Kabbalistic perspective, when we talk about meditation, we're speaking about bringing the mind into a space that is more, I call it in alignment with the vibration of the soul. Now, if you try to quiet your mind, to be able eventually to reach a space that gives you clarity, the why behind things, or certain direction that you're looking for, or answer for different questions that you might have, right? If you try to quiet your mind, you will find it is impossible to do that. Because the way the brain works on different states. So
this is not just spiritual, this is also scientific. I want to point out that the brain state and the brain waves are measurable with equipment. It's not a woo-woo kind of thing.
A simple EEG test, right? That today I have a device, anyone can get a device, you go online and you can order a device that gives you basically the data, the information about your brain state. And I use it every day because I want to know not only what I feel, which is very important, not only my schedule for today and what I'm going to do, not only the thoughts that running in my mind, I want to know where the state of my brain is and how do I bring the state of the brain into a place that can support me. in receiving more clarity in life, right? So definitely today it is science, and in a simple way, any of us can check where the brainwaves are, in what state. For the majority of the world, the majority of the day, the brain operates on what is called beta state.
When Mordechai was here a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, he spoke about it as well, that's the key to interrupting the reactive behavior, is slowing the brain waves down enough to be able to tap into the more enlightened response, the more enlightened choice to make. And it was a beautiful, very powerful episode.
Yeah. So I can say 24 years that I'm teaching the wisdom of Kabbalah. Maybe 7 years ago, when I started to delve into those modalities and more kind of the part of the scientific aspect of the way the brain works, the most exciting thing for me, it is the ability to do the work with different levels of intentions. Because in the end of the day, if we are able to deepen the intentions behind what we do, I was doing meditations for 20 years, but most of the years of meditating, to be able to access the healing powers inside of me and levels of clarity inside of me, to be able to guide more people that interested in doing it, right? The moment that the intention got deeper, the moment that we sharpening the intention, but the moment that we realizing what we are truly capable of doing and achieving, the same thing that we do, meditating in one way or meditating in another way, right? The intention is shifting the whole experience.
I think most of the world is operating intentionless. Like I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, most people get up, wake up in the morning, and they're on autopilot. This is not a criticism, by the way. This is simply the default, because the majority of humanity hasn't been told that there's another option or hasn't accessed other possibilities. So the reactive nature that most of the world functions in or with is actually the default, and therefore interrupting that cycle of reactive nature, right? In almost every spiritual practice, the first step is pause, right? The first step is to interrupt the snowball that's already rolling down the mountain. And a lot of people say that's the hardest part. You're now explaining why it's the hardest part, is that because our frequency is so rapid fire that it's almost impossible to interrupt it.
This is one. And the second thing, and again, I can say again, 7 years ago when things started to shift for me in the direction of meditating and also guiding the meditations. So we know that most of the time the mind operates on a robotic autopilot kind of direction.
Most people get insulted when we say stuff like that. Like, I'm not a robot, but it's not about, that you're not thinking or you're not thoughtful. It's that so much of the day we don't question. We're not focusing our energy and our power into the highest place we can.
Right, and it begins at the moment we wake up. Just a simple exercise. Try for the next week. As you wake up, to inject the first thought as a question. What do I really want from today? What is it that I really want from today? Instead of jumping into the day, into the activities, the agendas, the calendar, the meetings, taking care of the kids, all the things that part of our daily routine and responsibilities. But what I realized, that one way of interacting with deeper level of clarities is that moment when the situation comes and then I'm capable to pause. For me, I found there is a much more powerful way than practicing to pause when the situation is coming in, right? Because when the situation comes in, triggering any of the reactive thoughts or behaviors, even me pausing that moment, it's a reaction to the opportunity now the universe is giving me.
Right. It's still in response to something rather than creating that something.
Exactly. So something that I'm fully aware that it is not practical in many levels to many people. Even though we can make it practical, but even taking 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, I'm taking at least 1 hour to 2 hours at the beginning of each day to get my brain into a slower pace and to create a condition inside of me that will support me throughout the day to realize, to communicate with the situations that coming on my way. And many times, when you are clear about things, you don't need even situations to trigger anything inside of you. There will be always things coming in, obviously. But the practicing, and this is something that I'm trying to emphasize a lot again with anyone that's studying with me, the practicing to bring the brain into a slower pace, to allow the energy to enter into deeper state, to become more aligned with the energy of the soul that, as we said before, the soul holds all the keys for any healing and for any answer, for any clarity, for any strength that I will need today or any other day. And the direction is always moving into those deep spaces inside. So not only the moment that we need, but to be able to live more and more and more from those spaces in our lives.
I think it's also important to point out that the Kabbalists teach that the body is a reflection of the soul, and the body is a vehicle. So the all of the challenges that come from being a human being are the discord between the body and the soul, right? The soul is this constant, quiet broadcast, has all the answers, is literally a piece of the light force of the Creator. Is each one of us has that source within us, and yet the weight of the body, and I don't mean the physical weight, right? The burden of the body is often in conflict with that. We tend to, even though there are aspects of us that, let's say, for example, some people with their intuition, they have a knowing that comes as a physical sensation. It could be a ringing in their ears, it could be a feeling in their belly or in their heart, a tingling, but the body is more of a conductor, or it acts in service of the soul, but we often allow it to interfere with the soul's journey, knowingly or not. So even when a person has a particular, I want to think of something that's not life-threatening, but also very difficult, and I should have thought of this before the episode. A lot of people suffer from migraines, right? On one hand, they can be debilitating. At the same time, they're not life-threatening, right? I mean, people live with migraines, unfortunately, their entire lives. The operating system of the universe is not, they're not like the IRS that sends letters, right? The universe doesn't send letters that says exactly how much you owe and exactly what you filed wrong and which line and all those things. The universe is very quiet and very subtle. Maybe a dream, maybe song lyrics that come to you, maybe a thought that's fleeting, and then you get back to whatever it is you were doing. Then it'll come a little bit louder, and it'll say, here's a little challenge to help you wake up. It'll say, here's a little obstacle, or we always say rejection is protection, right? Sometimes you work towards something and it falls through, or it doesn't happen, or a relationship ends, and it gives us a kind of a pause for reckoning. What am I doing with my life? Why is this happening? Why did I worked so hard on this and now it's been taken away from me, or all this time lost, or how am I going to start again? Meaning the universe gradually builds up its amplitude amplification. I mean, maybe I made up a word. Because if we're not paying attention to those small, quiet whispers, it's actually for our benefit that the universe might raise it to the level of migraine, or I know it happens, unfortunately, on a pretty consistent basis. People have cancer scares, right? They think the doctor feels something, they feel something, they go and they check it, they have a couple months of being scared for their lives, and then they find out it was nothing, right? And fortunately, we know many more people that found out it was nothing than actually had to go down a road of healing. Why does that happen? Because the creator, the universe, that force often uses our physical life to awaken that spiritual growth. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, I'm not sure we'll get to it, is praying for others and helping others to awaken their own healing. By the way, we did an episode on that 2 years ago, now that I remember about it, called Helping Others Heal, literally 2 years ago, if you go back in the archives. And we had a student on who was a naturopath, and she was talking about, she used a beautiful metaphor about how much of the illness that happens is because people refuse to feel their emotions. That emotions are like a waterfall, and they're just meant to flow. But illness often happens when people try to stop the waterfall. Like they're saying, no anger, no sadness, no fear, no guilt. And they try to stop up the waterfall, and that trying to stop it up creates a blockage on a physical level. We want to also be able to use this week to shine on the areas in our lives where we might be stopping the waterfall, where we might, and it's obviously perfect to happen in the month of Cancer, where, if you're a water sign, you might not feel it as strongly, but most people who are not water signs are definitely struggling with the inundation of emotional turmoil, heightened sensitivity, and that the emotions are like clouds in the sky. They come and they go. They're meant to pass through. But when we try not to feel them, we actually cause them to be stuck. They're not flowing. They're not being allowed to flow. And that blockage, the body, right? The emotion isn't a physical thing. This is one of the things I think is so beautiful. The emotion itself isn't physical. So it's meant to flow like energy, like water. But when we try to stop it up with our energy, it can manifest as a blockage on a physical level.
Right.
And how profound that is, not only for our own healing, but when we look to try to support others in their healing, and whether it's through meditation or prayer or using any of the Kabbalistic tools, there has to be an opening in the other person to allow flow in. And that word flow, for me as a water sign also, I can't stand it, because until I became more spiritually awakened, the last thing I wanted to do was feel my emotions. That the reality is that feeling the emotions, allowing that flow, letting the waterfall cascade is much easier than dealing with the consequences of blocking it. And so this is a week that I invite all of our listeners to observe, to identify, to recognize, where are you trying to block the waterfall? Where you don't want to go there, somebody says something and it triggers you, and you escape to social media, or you find the chocolate, or you, whatever it is that you run to avoid dealing with the waterfall that really just wants to flow. And once you let it flow, it can then move, you can move on from it. But we all have these like waterfalls that we're stopping up, and, using my foot to stop the other waterfall. Allow that idea of allowing the process to happen actually is one of those things that can bring the body and the spirit into greater alignment. The body is trying to allow it, the soul is trying to allow it, and our intellect, the brain, says, I can't handle it, or I don't want it, or it's messy, or it's not appropriate here, or we don't do that, we don't go there. And unfortunately, the end result is often physical ailment, because we David uses the metaphor of river or swamp, right? We want to be a river, not a swamp. And when you're a swamp, that's when the unhealthiness starts to accumulate.
Right.
So what's something that we can do, or, I mean, you already gave us a couple of really powerful nuggets. Before we finish, I want to make sure that our students, well, hopefully we want to add a bonus episode for our listeners today to be able to experience what Yehuda does multiple times on a daily basis, guiding people through healing meditations using sound, not only sound, but one of the main tools that we use in the wisdom of Kabbalah for accessing any kind of energy: love, healing, clarity, certainty, fearlessness, is the Hebrew letters, the Aramaic letters. Those, even though they make up an alphabet, they're really more like musical notes that have a certain resonance and frequency. And by aligning ourselves to those resonances or frequencies, we change our own frequency. So maybe you can share a little bit about that briefly in less than 5 minutes, so that we can really take advantage of the energy of this week.
So, okay, so I think, first of all, many of the tools that we use, if it is certain frequencies, sound frequencies, or it is the names of God, the Hebrew letters that we use, again, I'm taking in the very specific direction, because using the tools and the names and the letters for over 20 years, I realized something that I knew in another level before, that if 1,000 people using the same tool, the same frequency, the same vibration, the same letters, in Kabbalah, one of the names that are more famous names, the 72 names of God, many of our students familiar with one sequence, which is the Mem He Shin, for instance, right? Now, this name, which we explained, doesn't require anyone that is using it to know Hebrew or the letters, because we connect with the sound. When we say the letter Mem, there is a sound, awakens certain vibration. So there are 3 kind of sounds of those letters that awaken certain vibration. Even with the most powerful tool that exists, if 1,000 people using the same tool, they probably will experience it differently, right? So for me, it is less about the tools. It is more about tuning ourselves into a space to become more receptive. The energy that can emanate or that can come through those names. And this is where we use the names of God. It is not just in a simple way to scan it, which is, there is power in it in some level.
Meaning to make an eye, visually looking at the letters is one level of connection, like the more basic one.
Right. And there is a lot of power in it. Another power that we can connect to is through, as I mentioned, the sound. So when you sound those vibrations, we're calling them letters, but for us, they are vibrations. When we're saying Mem, Hey, Shin, simply as we did it now, there's already a sound vibration that we connect in another level, beside of making the eye contact with the letters. When we want to deepen the connection with the light, with the energy that can come from those powerful names or frequencies, vibrations, it is about going back into what we spoke about at the beginning, creating certain condition internally to become more receptive to receive that energy. So the main work, it is not about using the letters or the sounds. The main work, it is bringing ourselves into a deeper space to be open, to allow. I often use this idea that the main work we need to do, it is to allow the universe to give it to us. So when we're getting to use those tools in the practice of the sacred sounds, in the meditations, The main work it is to bring ourselves into that deep level of condition, slowing down the brainwaves, to be able to become more receptive of this light to come in. And especially this week, when, as you mentioned at the beginning, the universe is bombarding each one of us with opportunities to receive. The universe kind of saying, just open yourself up. But if we go with what you mentioned before, which is very, very important part of the work, if I'm not paying attention that there are stagnant or stuck emotions inside of me, of anger, of blame from my childhood or from yesterday if something happened, certain level of frustrations that I never resolved, all of those type of emotions, not letting my vessel to have the ability to become receptive of all of this energy that comes, especially this week, every day of the year, but especially this week. So I would go with this type of intention in this week, paying attention, getting deeper as much as you can, especially with those unresolved emotions. Even if you don't know exactly what to do with those emotions, this is sometimes the issue, that what's the point of feeling it? For most of people, it is just creating additional suffering. But the moment that we allow ourselves to connect with those emotions and those feelings with the intention of the desire to clear any emotion that exists inside of me that doesn't serve me anymore in life, to create that space inside of me for healing to come in and to become awakened from inside, I believe that this is at least first steps, this week and any day of our lives, to allow the shift to begin at least to happen in that kind of a healing direction.
Beautiful. I don't know, even if you just allowed yourself to feel the energy when Yehuda was saying those letters or describing the intention, I don't think you could help but feel a shift in your own frequency, vibration there. That's what this week is all about. And hopefully for everyone who's listening, this is launching you into a journey of healing, even the unseen. You may have things that you're thinking about this week, challenges that you face or challenges that your loved ones face that you want to help focus this energy. Whenever we do a healing meditation, we also focus on things that have not yet manifest so that we can prevent them from ever needing to manifest. And that's really a lot of the emotional healing, is allowing things to flow so that they don't get stuck and don't cause tangible challenge to emerge. Weekly Energy Boost is available on all podcast platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. You can visit weeklyenergyboost.com to find out more about the sound healing and the sacred sounds work that Yehuda does. Get in touch with him through our website. You can also click the donate button and support Weekly Energy Boost to reach even more listeners and do even more amazing things. Look out for the bonus episode, which will just be sound healing meditation for this week. So that, imagine, like Yehuda said, thousands of people achieving that frequency. It's going to make a big difference in the world. So look out for that and let us know how it goes for you. Yehuda, thank you so much for joining me. I think it couldn't have been better timing, and hopefully we'll
Thank you
do
for
this again
having
soon.
me.
We also want to invite all of our listeners to join the WhatsApp community that we've created for our Weekly Energy Boost family. So you can scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching, or click the link in the episode description to join us, and looking forward to sharing new and interesting ways to connect and to support you every week as we apply these concepts, these wisdom, and these tools to our daily lives. Have a fabulous week, and we'll see you next time on the Weekly Energy Boost.